NijiSanJi innovated VTubers. They were the ones that normalized streaming content. They were the ones that popularized live 2D use for VTubers and, as an extension, lowered the barrier to entry for VTubing. And aside from this, they've also made certain VTuber niches viable. They were the ones that made male EN VTubing popular. They even started the idea of branching out to other countries to start overseas branches like Indonesia, a trend that even HoloLive copied. No matter your opinion of NijiSanJi as a company, there's a reason why they're as popular and influential as they are. They have their own hiccups, but what company or industry doesn't? Aside from HoloLive, NijiSanJi is one of the communities and companies in the VTuber world where other VTubers and smaller agencies look up to and whose standards they imitate. This is the ecosystem of the VTuber industry right now, and like any other entrepreneurial ecosystem, there are two ways to go about finding general success. The first way is to do things differently, to help you stand out in a sea of semi-generic tropes and cultivating a fan base that also seeks change. And the second way is to copy what the big boys are doing, pining on the chance to attract a portion of the fans from the mainstream and utilizing your own twist. Sometimes it may even be plausible to outright leech from them. From a business point of view, these two are valid and are proven and tested to actually work. One of them has a moral issue, but it's undeniable that it still brings in views and money. The success of the two big forces in the VTuber industry right now, NijiSanJi and HoloLive, are proof of this because they evolved in the industry by doing these two routes. HoloLive grew by basically doing what Kizuna Ai was doing but with an idol twist, before also doing what NijiSanJi was doing with their own idol twist again. They made online idols and VTubers interlinked with one another, creating a unique culture that a lot of VTubers in the world right now try to imitate. However, NijiSanJi grew by doing something different. Instead of doing what Kizuna Ai and the rest were doing, they opted to go 2D, and in doing so, revolutionized VTubing as a whole, popularizing live 2D as the main medium for showing your avatars and lowering the barrier to entry for everyone that wants to become a VTuber. And because they were innovators in this regard, it was them that became the mainstream VTuber agency in Japan. It's these two different paths of growing that often also determines the strengths and weaknesses in the culture of the company or community. NijiSanJi and HoloLive are fundamentally different companies with different strengths and weaknesses, and often the strength of one is the weakness of the other. But because these two agencies are fundamentally different, they also have their own flaws that are inherent and unique in their own community and culture, consequences of the decisions they made and the direction they chose to go. HoloLive has problems unique to them, and I'll be making a video about that's similar to this one soon enough. VShoujo has also problems unique to them too, which I've already covered in the past, but it's a video I actually want to remake because I feel like I've really only glossed over the surface of the company's issues in that video. And of course, NijiSanJi also has its own unique problems. Problems which in 2023 has become more apparent to a lot of people. So in this video, I'm not going to tell you about the history of the company, nor am I going to list the many controversies that surrounded NijiSanJi in the beginning of 2023. No, in this video, we are going to be talking about the absolute state of NijiSanJi. Now, I know I said I wasn't going to talk about NijiSanJi's history, but I will have to briefly mention a portion of it to give you some context on how and why they became the way they are now. First founded in mid-2017, Ichikara, the parent company of NijiSanJi, was supposed to be just your everyday tech and app development company. But in early 2018, they had a certain project that they wanted to push and advertise, and that was to be their live 2D face tracking app. And the people that were supposed to show off the capabilities of their tech were none other than the 8 people of NijiSanJi's first generation. But before I tell you how this debut went, let me remind you of that era's norms. See, at the time, 3D and pre-recorded content was the VTuber industry's norm, and like most innovations, going differently was somewhat ridiculed. They had faced ridicule and doubts during this time for embracing 2D. But with the curious few surprised by the VTubers' rather fun personalities and the novelty of the concept, the first gen was off to a great start. Instead of playing a video game pre-recorded, they were going on live, and their content were primarily just talking streams, giving them a more personal, relatable, and parasocial aspect to their content in stark contrast to every other VTuber. However, one among the first talents shone brighter than the others, the godmother of NijiSanJi herself, the industry breaker, and the complete fucking weirdo, Tsukino Mito. Now, these VTubers, particularly Mito, exploded in popularity, so much so that only 3 months after her debut, she had already broken 100k subs. The outcome was obvious for Ichikara the moment the livers got that popular. It was a success. An overwhelming massive one, even. And that in turn told them one other thing, that they needed to take advantage of that lightning in a bottle. And they would do so, as 1 month later after the first gen's debut, they launched an audition call and released a second wave. 2 months later, their Gamers wave arrived, then NijiSanji Seed, and a month after that, Voice, and another month after that, another wave, but this time expanding their sites overseas with NijiSanji Taipei Shanghai. It doesn't stop here because they expand further and faster, but at this point you should be able to get an idea of what they were doing. NijiSanji was expanding fast. Too fast, some critics might say. They were essentially flooding their VTuber company with a lot of members. But they were trying to be varied while going about it. A smart business decision too, because you'd have as many talents try to fill up as many niches, and thus try to acquire as much market share as you can while also creating and fostering new sorts of communities that'll come to like your product. NijiSanji went about this expansion pretty smart. They weren't just blanket firing to see what sticks, they were actually targeting niches. The first 2 generations were focused on Zatsudans and shitposts. Seed was its own branch for a kayfabe-focused endeavor. NijiSanji Gamers were focused on, well, gaming. Voice, which actually imploded within a month of its inception due to internal problems, were all male and made to target female viewers. NijiSanji Taipei Shanghai was a smart way to expand to overseas markets because the label dodged political conflicts in the 2 regions. They even created the Virtual Talent Academy, a course that specializes in training people to become content creators, and it's an endeavor that I think not many people give them enough praise for. And aside from that, they were making radio dramas, making music, voice acting. Without a doubt, they were doing something that not a lot of VTuber agencies were doing, expanding fast and expanding intelligently. They had their own little culture, big events, and wild shenanigans. They pretty much founded the interpersonal relationships and culture that other VTuber agencies were going to follow in the future, HoloLive included. But there is one thing that they failed to address as the company expanded, and it was a problem so insidious that NijiSanji struggles to shake it off even today. All the dramas that plague NijiSanji is an entire clusterfuck that requires its own undertaking. So I won't be making a video about all of them, unfortunately, because I don't want to dig up drama from years ago that doesn't really matter anymore. In any case, as they were expanding, one has to naturally gather resources, whether human or capital, to support their endeavor. By September of 2018, mere 10 months after NijiSanji was founded, they had already 66 members. 64 if you don't include the 2 Voice members that decided to quit. That is a lot of people, and it already sets the environment for one massive problem. And it is in this problem that NijiSanji found itself ever struggling. The countless drama that you've heard from the company are all because of this. Management. One of a content creator or celebrity's best friends. It allows for individuals to be able to enjoy their careers and leave the boring, technical, and tedious business stuff to someone who has studied and was trained to be able to handle it. And as a VTuber agency, a manager is the bare minimum one can give to a VTuber so that they can just focus on content creating. It allows for second opinions, plots a direction for your content. Basically, it makes your life a whole lot easier. They take care of the talents while also enforcing the interests and guidelines of the company. NijiSanji has over 200 VTubers, and back in 2018, they had around 100. And as one can probably imagine, managing that many VTubers is going to prove a bit difficult. And this difficulty breeds one problem that's not exclusive to NijiSanji, but one that they've become very notorious for, and one that was actually very rampant during their earlier years. Veterans may have heard or seen some of NijiSanji's old management horror stories. A lot of NijiSanji livers basically ranted, complained, and saying that the company's management was garbage and that they didn't do anything. The NijiSanji resistance was literally built for this endeavor, a way for the talents to voice problems and issues with the company. Problems like acquiring copyright, the collab restrictions on C that got them treated as if they weren't even part of the same company. Yamiyono Maruru's tweets implying the terrible things she suffered under the company, NijiSanji India and its management's collapse, the absolute state of NijiSanji Korea's management, with entire allegations of manager-encouraged harassments, favoritism, bullying, and all sorts of terrible things that I cannot go into detail. And while I can pick apart these individual dramas and tell you the factors that led to it, they all have a common theme, and that theme is that the management was pretty bad or was almost non-existent. This is a natural result of the company's decisions. They had an offhand style of managing and essentially stretched themselves and their resources too thin. HQ's management was already pretty tough, but it was way worse when they gave the responsibility to other branch managers, especially in the VTubing niche, a field so new nobody quite understood how to make it work yet. Quality control is something every company struggles when they expand. It's difficult to retain the same kind of management the main branch has and enforce similar rules, or hell, even find the appropriate talents that would benefit the company the best. And it gets even worse when HQ tries to implement rules based on Japanese culture to non-Japanese branches. NijiSanji Taipei Shanghai were the first example of this. They were essentially what I call progenitors of Virtua Real. Whereas Shanghai Taipei were a partnership with another company called Capsule, Virtua Real was a partnership with Bilibili. Shanghai Taipei walked so Virtua Real could run. But this doesn't just end on Shanghai Taipei because Ichikara decided to launch an Indian branch in 2020, whose management did the bare minimum for and whom they rebranded to NijiSanji only to revert it back to NijiSanji India so they can start over with their EN branch. NijiSanji India walked so Lazulite can run. Then they merged with a failing Korean company and were able to pick up talents like Alice Mana and Nan Bora. However, they found out later that the company's management was actually terrible. It was an entire shitfest, and fortunately or unfortunately depending on where you stand, they were merged with NijiSanji Indonesia. And while it was beneficial for KR as a whole, ID took somewhat of a hit. It was a bit hard to swallow, especially for the Indonesian fans, because it essentially took away the branch's identity and distinction that made the Indonesian livers different and unique. There might be a thesis you can extract from all these instances, and that is the fact that Ichikara is not afraid to graduate members, disband groups, and tear down entire branches. They are not afraid of sweeping their VTubers' careers under the rug when they deem it necessary and when they're not profitable. NijiSanji likes to experiment with new projects, and if it succeeds, they stick with it. If it fails, they throw it on the dumpster, spit on it, and light it on fire. There's a certain coldness there, and I think that's a good thing business-wise. It's good for any business to be able to make cold-hearted decisions in order to thrive. But when you're in an industry where you are making fans care about your product in this deep, emotional, and parasocial way, you cultivate a community that's not going to be understanding of your decisions. It's kind of counterproductive, actually, when you think about it. I know I said earlier that NijiSanji was targeting niches in a smart way. But when they ran out of ideas and niches to target specifically, they just started debuting talents willy-nilly to land at least one hit. However, as a whole, the model really works from a money-making perspective. NijiSanji didn't build their culture or their community to make it so that you'll watch everyone in the company, unlike HoloLive. They want you to watch only the people you like. Looking at it from a macro point of view, it is a decent business strategy. It's in line with their variety content appeal. They want new livers fast for a possibility of one of them exploding, but they also want new livers so the company can rack up as many watch hours as possible, which in turn will give them more money and IP to profit from. They aren't losing any significant revenue because this business model makes it so that they can only win financially. Like it or not, it works, people. In fact, this was a model that made them so successful and very different from the big names of the industry in the first place. But just because this was a model that worked for NijiSanji HQ due to their established presence in Japan doesn't mean that it's gonna work everywhere else. Aside from the moral problems that go along with it, which we'll get into more later, there are just specific and unique factors that make it so that it's a bit more difficult to work in overseas branches, especially in ones with cultures that the company isn't familiar with. NijiSanji chose to be hands-off in managing these overseas branches because they figured that delegating the task to someone that was more familiar with the culture was better and it's just less work. But the problem therein is that the branch leaders they chose so far didn't know how to integrate NijiSanji's own philosophy into said cultures, as we saw from all other overseas projects that they had. As long as they were pumping in money, HQ did not seem to care. And even if HQ didn't have anything to do with what happens in their overseas branches, it's still going to reflect badly on the company as a whole since their name is associated with the brand. There are just factors outside their main market that the suits of NijiSanji don't understand. And it's them being unable to determine these factors that made their older overseas branches tank. As for the English branch, well, we'll get to that later. Now, despite my ramblings about the problems that haunted NijiSanji, I think it's unfair for the company if we criticize aspects of their management that they've done their best to rectify. While NijiSanji had almost weekly drama back in 2018, HQ's management had acquired experience and learned to work through the hurdles that used to plague them. Back then, NijiSanji had a reputation of seeming like a black company among bystanders and even to some fans, but that perception had slowly eroded as time flew by. The NijiSanji resistance just stopped because of the company's better conditions. Their experience of handling drama and making sure that their mistakes are being dealt with before it erupts into a full-blown scandal has allowed NijiSanji to sail rather smoothly come late 2020. I mean, there was still drama, don't get me wrong, but it was significantly lesser and no longer much of a big deal. At that time, it was CoverCorp's turn to be shat on by the VTuber community for being so incompetent compared to NijiSanji. But a comment I read somewhere put it succinctly by saying that NijiSanji had already gotten through those hurdles back when it was still a relatively smaller company, especially in the West, whereas CoverCorp had gotten similar problems when they already were becoming a mainstream force in the EN side. And as a result, they've gotten more attention and negative press. They were simply ill-equipped to handle those problems. Problems like these would only be exacerbated too by the fact that the VTubing industry at this time was just an infantile industry. By the time these black company-esque dramas happened in NijiSanji, the industry was only 3 years old. Nobody had set the standards and set a path for them to follow. And again, Ichikara was doing things differently from more established companies like Activate or Entom. They had no guidelines, no rules, nothing to be able to use as reference on what to do and what not to do in the industry. All they could do was extrapolate by using similar industries like the music industry or use case studies like Activate's own mistakes, but as a result, they weren't able to anticipate specific problems that were unique to the VTuber industry or their own culture. It was only natural that they kept making all sorts of mistakes. As trailblazers for the industry, it was on them to make these mistakes so that other people can learn from them, most especially themselves. I think this is a perspective nobody gives that much thought of, but one I think is quite significant in explaining Ichikara, CoverCorp, and even older VTuber companies like Activate's past drama. Hell, right now NijiSanji is starting to slow down its rapid-fire launches, at least in EN, and their audition process actually doesn't take 3 weeks anymore, it takes entire months. They are actually taking their sweet time in making sure that the talents they debut are thoroughly inspected and would have some materials to show on their debut, such as their group introduction songs. I mean, they could do better. For one, management helping the talents for a direction or ideas in their debut and helping them pay for the resources, that would be cool. But hey, they're a small indie company, purisu understandu. But despite those hiccups, at the very least, it was better than how it used to be. I think NijiSanji HQ has done a good job addressing a lot of the managerial problems that used to plague them. But there's just some issues they can't escape from. Problems that started appearing when NijiEN exploded back in 2022. Problems reminiscent of the old ones but with the EN culture's unique twist. Problems that in 2023 has all but made its presence known with a rather explosive entry. Gentlemen, let's talk about the present. While I've primarily focused on the managerial problems that the company had back then, it's time to give attention to the now. Most especially to NijiEN, the effects of a stretched out audience, and the very human consequences of their cold business decisions. 2022 was NijiSanji's golden year. In fact, that sentence is the title of a video of mine that celebrated their success at the end of last year. They've paved another niche for the industry and popularized a new market. They've also broken multiple records and set their foothold in the EN VTuber sphere and even in China, more strongly than ever. But with growth also comes setbacks, and there are just setbacks that leave a scar forever. Let's talk about drama for a bit. I myself have touched upon some of the branch's significant dramas. And despite my insistence and disapproval of being called a drama channel, it cannot be denied that the reason I got to where I am now was that I covered drama. And while most of my videos are far from negative drama content, my coverage of drama are the most popular videos I have, and it's what most people know me for. Me being called a drama channel by those who don't follow me closely is a label of the community I am unfortunately unable to shed no matter what I do. But why am I talking about myself, you ask? Well, it's because it's a problem that NijiEN is experiencing right now. Livers like Finana, Kyo, Enna, Hex Haywire, and most especially Luxium and Vox Akuma. Luxiem is NijiEN's golden goose, but rather quickly after their debut, a new fanbase gathered around them. They started to foster and attract female simps, and as a consequence of that, the air around Luxiem somewhat changed. So too did their behaviors to make themselves more welcoming to their female fanbase. As they became bigger and bigger, they started to be as parasocial with their fanbase the same way the fanbase were of them. A feedback loop was created. It's an issue that's not exclusive to Luxiem and the boys though. In fact, I'd argue this happening is more common among female VTubers to their male fanbase. But the unique problem that Luxiem had was that they didn't know how to handle this female viewer base initially. They did not know how to distance themselves from their fans, and the fanbase knew not how to distance themselves from them either. Hell, even Noctix suffered from this problem despite their attempt at not being as parasocial as Luxiem. After all, this was an entirely new demographic that not many big VTubers in the past had any experience of catering to. That, and the fact that their female fanbase were tossing a shit ton of money at them. At that point, it becomes hard to deny your fanbase on what they want. The attention, the money, the clout. Couple that with imposter syndrome and other mental issues that the boys had, and it's pretty difficult to not lean on that fanbase. The point is that there were a lot of factors that made it difficult for Luxiem to start drawing lines against their fans. It's fair to say that they were even scared of doing it, in fear of the volatility of the fanbase they cultivated, or in fear of losing the momentum they were gaining for the branch. Perhaps a bit of both. This was most especially true for Vox, who actually doubled down on his fans. But when death threats were sent against his dear friend Reimu, a happening which she had zero responsibility for, Vox finally found the courage to tell his fanbase off. However, he still proceeded to cater to that fanbase and create roleplay ASMRs and tripled down on his parasociality appeal, going full ham on the boyfriend experience. And it is in this action that gained him the stigma among non-Vox Akuma fans that he's just a thirst-posting Fujo baiter that only caters to horny women for money. Even though that's not the case, and that the man himself is actually quite a talented entertainer in general. It's this action and the many more that would follow that reversed the impression that a lot of people had of NijiEN and NijiEN fans. The consensus on NijiEN pre-Luxiem days were that Hololive were the more insane fanbase due to its association with idol culture, while NijiSanji, since it's more general, was more chill. Yet all of that turned around in the blink of an eye. These days, the gachis of both fanbase have roughly the same amount of lunacy, especially when it comes to things that their precious VTubers cannot and should not do. Just that Hololive members infuriate men, and NijiSanji infuriates women. And even though that this was something that excluded the NijiEN girls, people just can't help but generalize. In any case, Luxiem and Noctix had found themselves in a situation where everyone that does not regularly watch them started thinking that they were nothing more but Fujo bait. Me personally, I think there's nothing wrong with Fujo baiting in moderation. I mean, hey, if Hololive girls can Yuri bait, why are we mocking men for gay baiting too? But regardless, this is how powerful impressions are on people. One's opinion, perception, and feelings for something can turn with just one action, with just one drama, with just one simple event, even if such impressions goes against their better judgment. And this is going to be an important theme for the video going forward. I want to expand more on the impression that people had for NijiSanji before they got this popular. NijiSanji had a rather favorable opinion in the eyes of VTuber fans that weren't exclusively watching Hololive. While a lot of tribalistic Hololive fans had the opinion that NijiEN wasn't really even a competitor, those that cared not for tribes had a really positive opinion of the branch. They had the impression that they were the underdogs, and 100% they were. The general VTuber fanbase and even some Hololive fans themselves had the impression that Hololive culture had a sense of restriction, inauthenticity, and strict regulation, as if their priority was maintaining this absurdly clean idol image instead of pursuing content that stretched the borders of art and entertainment. Meanwhile, NijiEN were more free. A lot of the things that were off the table for Hololive members, such as the freedom to collab with anyone easily, the ability to address and say certain things, and all sorts of content ideas weren't a problem to the EN livers. NijiEN didn't have the negative connotation and the toxic traits associated with idol culture. They were a blank slate, a perfect haven for VTuber aspirants to create something new, a place where a balance of clout and freedom was achieved. Which was why when the collab of Ollie in Holo ID and Selen of NijiEN was cancelled, Backlash followed suit, and most pointed their fingers at Hololive for stopping it. But when a lot more collab opportunities came up, it seemed more and more to many people that it was actually NijiEN's management stopping the collabs from happening in the first place. Now, this whole collab restriction drama was resolved some time ago with Regis and Alban's significant collab, and while there was no confirmation on which side actually stopped the collabs in the first place, the impression still remains that it was NijiSanji doing it. I wanted to bring this back because, like I said, people looked at NijiSanji as the underdog, and the collab ban highlighted the idea of Hololive culture bad and NijiSanji freedom good that ran rampant among many people. It was an impression that was very popular among NijiSanji fans, especially the new ones. However, soon enough, that impression changed, as I've said. It seemed more apparent to many people that it's not that NijiSanji had more freedom, it was just that management was severely lacking. Take for example, the milli-secret GC drama, where other NijiSanji members were pretending to be 4chaners and exposed themselves to the public that 4chan lives rent-free in their heads. After it got quite some backlash and Millie addressed and reaffirmed that it was supposed to be a joke, some people didn't see it as a joke because acknowledging trolls and antis even in a satirical setting would only embolden them. Pomo and Mista distanced themselves from this due to the lack of communication and that it made them uncomfortable. After this, Millie clarified that she actually did do the groundwork to let people know that the stream was happening, but evidently, not everyone got the memo. After that, Millie was unable to stream for a week, and it was speculated that she was actually stealth suspended, and for quite some time this was supposed to be just speculation. But it was just recently confirmed that stealth suspensions were real and was put under the guise of a temporary break, which reflects bad on the company if that was truly the case of what happened to Millie. Stealth suspensions make it so that no official announcement of any EN livers are going to be 100% trustworthy anymore. People are going to have to question every mental health break or similar forms of disappearances from the livers now. This agency just showed that they have absolutely zero transparency and aren't honest at all. And back to the Millie drama. This kind of stream idea is the kind of thing that managers should be watching out for, and somehow they did not. Instead, if her being stealth suspended after this whole thing was real, why suspend her? Well, yes, it was kind of a short-sighted thing for Millie to come up with. This was mostly management's fault for letting it fly. It is management's job to monitor their ideas, or at the very least ensures that the stream goes smoothly. That at the very least, there was some semblance of communication with everyone else. These people failed in their obligation to watch over what the hell their talents were doing, and they're punishing the talents for their own negligence. If one's management style is hands-off, at least make sure that those under you can coordinate and properly communicate. But with a roster as large as NijiSanji EN, such a thing may not be so easy. You can have talent freedom, sure. You can have a hands-off approach, sure, but make sure that you're managing the talents when it matters. Putting specific restrictions despite its bad connotation among many VTuber fans isn't necessarily a bad thing. They are there to protect the talents and the company. But for some reason, NijiSanji's restrictions were placed on very asinine things that actually don't matter. Like banning handcam streams for a time, them not allowed to play their own genmates' songs, or even talk to a manager that's not the one assigned to them. Hell, they don't even want Silent Tatsuki to reward her own fanbase monetarily in her own competition. Like I said, very dumb and very stupid restrictions. The thing about VTuber companies in an industry that requires greater reputational standing in order to garner public trust is that restrictions are all but inevitable as they grow. Now that they are big and mainstream, and they've experienced their fair share of controversies too, the words and actions of their talents hold more weight now more than ever. And because of that, I think the company has to think about their reputation and restrict certain things. Whether NijiEN's management learned from these yabs is something we've yet to see, because it doesn't seem like they learned anything at all. That being said, there's also one other problem that the management has been very blatant about, and one that many fans take issue with. Ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about favoritism. Here's the thing about NijiSanji's waves and units. They want to help these groups stand out on their own 2 feet and be something far beyond just members of NijiSanji. When people see Nornis or Crow Noir, they don't want people thinking of NijiSanji. They want them to be their own independent thing. The same principle applies to Luxiem. When people hear the word Luxiem, they want them to be more than just the male VTuber group under NijiSanji. They want them to be beyond that, and while making as much money as possible. With the popularity that Luxiem has garnered, demand skyrocketed, and their popularity actually poured over to other talents as well. It is undeniable that Luxiem was the reason why everyone in the branch started to get some kind of traction in the first place. A rising tide lifts all boats, after all. People wanted more, and they were willing to pay for it. If Vox's super chat revenue a month after his debut said anything, it was that this new fanbase was something else. However, this new fanbase also primarily only wanted the boys, and NijiSanji was all too happy to give them what they want. As more and more merch, events, and all kinds of company-sponsored rewards Luxiem received, it started to feel as if other members, aside from those who orbited the boys, were getting left behind. Luxiem was only a few months old, and they started having more merch variety than literally every single member that preceded them. Not just merch variety, but more merch releases too. Management really only half-assedly implemented new products for non-Luxiem members just because fans couldn't stop complaining about it. And hell, often the merch was so uninspired, low quality, and lazy, people would literally throw shit at the company for blatantly trying to siphon as many cheap and easy bucks as they possibly could. They believed that any objectively terrible merch item they put up on their store was still going to sell really well. It was an absolute disrespect for the audience's money and intelligence. However, unfortunately, they had a good reason to disrespect the audience's money and intelligence, because the piss-poor quality merch that NijiSanji made still sold really well. This whole cheap and piss-poor merch issue is one that'll persist until it stops being profitable. In fact, the company doesn't even see it as an issue, they see it as an exploit. And this makes sense, because the talents only get 1 to 2% of their merch's profits anyway. With that in mind, of course they'd want to pump out more Luxiem merch. It was literally an easy money hack. They didn't want to deliver quality products, they wanted easy money so they can make that income report look the best it can. In any case, the favoritism for Luxiem was very evident, one that carried even to their projects. When Luxiem teased Jazz on the Clock, there was this week-long song and dance about it on Twitter. They hyped it to an absolute insane degree. But when did management ever promote the other group's project to a similar extent? This was a controversy that drove a wedge between other members' fanbases. Because although NijiSanji is doing its best to maximize profitability, there was a capitalist and moral problem in doing so. Just because people know that it makes sense business-wise doesn't mean that it won't feel like shit for the fans of other livers and the other livers themselves. The favoritism problem started to highlight the morally darker aspect of the company's very successful business model, that a significant number of livers inside the company cannot even receive a fraction of the rewards and a whole slew of other favors that the big boys receive. It's not Luxiem's fault, don't get me wrong. It's not like they asked to be the favorites, but goddamn does it feel bad. The favoritism issue reiterated to the fanbase that NijiSanji again is not afraid to remove anything or anyone that isn't profitable. After all, it's the consequence of their business model. If you're throwing a lot of stuff to see what sticks, some aren't going to stick at all. And if they won't remove a talent or the talent chose not to be removed, they'll most likely be neglected. And whether the talents put up with it will be all up to them. It saturates the already existing fanbase and breeds envy, sadness, or feelings of unfairness in a lot of people, not just from the fans but also from other livers like I said. In fact, this was a sentiment that other livers kept echoing multiple times as it happens. And while hierarchies like these are actually a very common sight among multiple companies and communities, remember, you are in the VTuber industry. An industry that has you making people care about your product in a deep, parasocial, and emotional way. And such people are inherently more biased to their individual Oshis rather than the companies they are in most of the time. So if their Oshis aren't benefiting from the NijiSanji renaissance that Luxiem created, then to them, such renaissance did not happen at all. Even if NijiSanji didn't do anything technically wrong, because they seem like they are quite open to the fact that a liver being neglected is a possibility, the fact that it's still even a possibility is what pisses people off. What makes VTuber aspirants want to join NijiSanji is the clout they'll receive and management. But if they can't even get that much attention due to the saturation and possible neglect they'll experience, then what's the point? If they can't even get good management, then why join in the first place? Is it still worth it being in NijiSanji anymore? I mean, I imagine it's still worth it to a lot of people. A small amount of clout is better than no clout, some management is better than no management, but with the state of the branch at this point, it's hard not to feel like you got cheated. Sold a dream that wasn't as grand or profitable as the company or its fans made it to be. And in that case, people are going to have to remove the rose-tinted view of what it means to join NijiSanji. Because really, perhaps it's not as great as what most people think it is. And I think this is a huge part of what made people turn their backs on NijiSanji. People are starting to notice the problems that the branch has. They're waking up to the company's profit-driven goals and its underlying moral problem. From all the yabs, from the actions of its talents, from the consequences of management's exploitations, NijiSanji's magic is dying. Again, people may understand that the business model works or that the favoritism is a natural consequence of the fact that they want to make as much money as possible, but just because it works for the company, just because it's profitable, doesn't mean it feels right. Like I said, there's a moral problem here, and it doesn't seem like management gives a shit on what people say. With NijiEN growing rapidly, it was natural that drama was going to happen that involves their fanbase. And just like the gachis of Hololive, they were going to be put under a microscope for the internet to tear apart and study. Again, one such example is the Vox and Reimu drama. Another is Mista's fanbase having issues with Mika just because they're good friends. And another is Uki's own mods power-tripping, thirst spamming, and gatekeeping Uki from his own chat. Since their community was growing, new fans that aren't familiar of the general VTuber culture flooded the NijiSanji community, and what came naturally was of course chaos and most especially tribalism. With the explosion of Loxium, Hololive tribalists felt threatened that the spotlight of their favorite VTuber company was getting stolen from them. Meanwhile, NijiSanji tribalists who saw the Livers numbers beat Hololive's for the first time in a while thought that this was going to be a turning point. And for new NijiSanji tribalists who didn't know about Hololive aside from the naysays of their own hug boxes, even more tribalism would be fostered as a reinvigorated disdain for idol culture and Hololive talents would begin to surface. This was both caused and amplified by the Discord League drama that had the EN Livers seem like they were trash-talking HoloConsole, which led to Kali unfollowing some NijiSanji members. And while this situation was presumably resolved internally, as we've seen from Kali refollowing some of them back, the more invested Hololive fans haven't forgotten. And for better or worse, they aren't the kind of fanbase that forgets. Salome's explosion also bred more of these tribalists, believing that she would be the Gura killer. Both Luna and Tempos debuting at the same time also lit some sparks. However, Hololive fans, especially the veterans, weren't just scared and threatened that HoloEN finally had some noteworthy competition, they had one other reason to feel a great disdain for NijiEN for, especially the boys. And that reason is China. See, Loxium got really big in China. Hell, Vox's debut in Bilibili got him around 1 million yuan, and naturally, that got the boys to cater to them in a way that they felt appropriate. Management even joined in and capitalized on the development, getting them to make their own Bilibili accounts, adjusting their content to be inclusive to the Chinese, and all sorts of things. And it is a smart business decision, and one that I actually don't think is an invalid decision to make. But people didn't like the extent of their pandering. As an example, Vox was in hot water for making a thumbnail using a Taiwanese artist's art and editing China's flag into it. It was out of ignorance, but it's still bad optics for Taiwanese and EN fans. In any normal circumstance, this wouldn't have riled anyone up. VTubers and VTuber companies engaging in different cultures in the hopes of connecting well with their fanbase there is a good thing. Uniting the world through waifus and husbandos, as pretentious as that sounds, isn't that what companies like Hololive and NijiSanji claim their objective is? Hell, that's the reason why Hololive got so big in China and the rest of the world back in 2020 in the first place. But this wasn't a normal circumstance, for you see, China's reputation in the EN sphere is rather delicate. Not just because they are in a tense political dissension with different nations around the world, but because they have wounded the Hololive community. They were responsible for the hate campaign against Kiryu Coco and all the deranged anti-ing that Hololive experienced back in late 2020 and early 2021. Hell, for a long time now, China was the reason why people thought NijiSanji was blocking EN collabs from happening in the first place. But in NijiEN's defense, the same demographic that harassed Coco back then wasn't the same demographic that NijiEN catered to. The people back then were male Chinese fans who liked Hololive and idol stuff. Meanwhile, NijiEN attracted a female fanbase that doesn't even heard of Coco before. I'm sure there is some small percentage of overlap, but I also imagine that number isn't significant enough. There's a nuance to be had there. Just because they are from the same country doesn't mean they are from the same crowd. However, one can't deny the different sets of what is considered appropriate from this new fanbase can be somewhat disruptive, especially if they are unfamiliar with the culture around VTubing. It was primarily the Chinese fans that were sending death threats to Reimu and caused that whole drama. The parasocial Mista drama with Mika too. Again, I'm not saying that them catering to China is a bad thing, just that it was a factor that divided the EN fanbase. There's also one other thing. Aside from the Chinese fanbase, Luxium attracted the Twitter crowd, a demographic on the internet that is the reason why Twitter's got quite the negative reputation. They have established a fanbase that politicizes a lot of things that they do even if there's literally nothing to be politicized about. Sonny being a cop? Oh god, NijiEN is so insensitive. Don't they know police brutality is a thing? Mista mispronouncing a character's name? Oh god, he deserves to be harassed and actually hard-doxed for being so uneducated and being so insensitive and racist to that particular culture. I could name more. Like, Zion getting her address, ID, and dangerous personal info dropped by other NIJISANJI fans during her suspension. Kind of more. Again, these are not a good look in the eyes of the general community. VTubing was supposed to be this comfy place where people can just enjoy waifus and husbandos. Escapism is one of VTubing's main appeal, and this small but loud portion of the GEN's fanbase disrupted that space. This is a key reason in the disdain against NIJISANJI fans, with people being given the impression that they'll rile things up and associate simple actions with a culture war or politics even if it's just a big fat nothing burger. It is similar to the behaviors of Hololive fans when they subconsciously hold their talents to follow in the idol culture and not interact with men or whatever. But instead of idol culture shit, NijiEN has to deal with parasocial and political shit. In that aspect, while the reasoning for both fanbases are different, their behavior is roughly the same. Again, the NijiEN fans that were part of this discussion were seen to be different and more reasonable than the unhinged idol fans of Hololive. But with all these little reactions and controversies going on, was that really true anymore? Of course, I recognize that all of these fans are just a small, very vocal minority. Similar to how it's also just a small and vocal minority of Hololive fans that complains whenever their Oshis aren't being very idol-like and collabs with a male or whatever. Yet, it doesn't change the fact that the sight of these very loud weirdos will still burn a negative impression or enforce an already existing stigma against NIJISANJI, its members, and its fanbase. That's just how unfortunately the internet works. People only hear drama and will immediately assume things just for the sake of having an opinion. And usually, people assume the worst. But with VTubing exploding further in 2022 and having its own set of content creators around VTubers, word of all these drama reached far and wide, and you have a lot of people to thank for that, including me, actually. I damn well know how you guys want your drama fresh from the oven, you absolute bastards, but that's not the kind of food that I serve. I cover my drama from a more autopsical and specific sense, only talking about it once the drama is over and deconstructing it from there. But fear not, because there are notorious individuals that are essentially the newsman of these happenings, reporting such events as it occurs. Drama fresh from the oven, just like how you people want. These are the loudest mouthpieces of the community's yabs and occurrences, and whether you think they are leeches or not, they actually have their own space in the community. However, because of the inherent nature of these types of content affecting these agencies' reputation negatively, these agencies would rather them be silent about their yabs, wouldn't they? So Nusagi, you stupid rabbit, I hear you ask, what did they do to make sure that they preserve or even improve their reputation among the community through these news tubers? Did they do something wild and cool that these tubers would report about it and praise them? Did they fix some of their problems substantially to make it so that these tubers would actually be able to notice and make a video about it or something? Well, how about abusing the copyright system and silencing them? Fucking obviously that's the best way to rectify the reputational damage that the company has already accrued over the months. So follow me, you disgusting drama-hungry degenerates, let's go to the pig pen and play in the mud. Let's involve ourselves in some drama. Now for this segment, I felt like I wouldn't be doing it justice if I were to talk in behalf of the people that actually got targeted by the copyright strikes. So, I have one of them with me right now. One that, despite his controversial reputation, I think would provide some unique and personal insight into the situation. Kyo, take it away.
It's no real secret that most of NijiSanji's drama come from its abundance of talent and the problems that went along with it, whether that be managerial, financial, or reputational, and each of the dramas made them look worse day by day. The Zion termination statement that was worded with little grace and the subsequent details of it made the internal environment of the company seem bad. 3 of Luxium's members snarkily making fun of the AR concert's cancellation announcement, an announcement so poorly worded and executed, Selin and Pomu had to step in and clarify the truth, making management seem really incompetent not just because of the poor choice of words, but because of the lack of communication with the members. Management adding a liver and misspelled their name, which led to an anti taking the misspelled name, causing anyone to click on it to be brought to an account that maliciously docks talents from the company, a mistake they didn't correct for a significant amount of time. Millie's secret group chat, an undertaking that either should not have been allowed or something that was monitored and communicated with other members tightly due to its involvement with 4chaners of all crowds. Yugo's graduation that didn't even seem like a graduation but more of a termination, and now more recently the response from Zion Lanza, who not only confirmed a lot of bad speculations that surrounded the company, but also made the internals of the branch look worse than it initially was. There are so many more instances of management screwing up and making the company as a whole look terrible, which led to NijiSanji as a brand being damaged. That in turn made them play damage control, striking my channel and False ID's channel. Of course, this didn't actually work in their favor, considering False and I both got the strikes removed and tons of people revolted against the company. But why did they think it was necessary to do it in the first place? Because they believe False and I are damaging their brand by talking about their mishaps and drama. However, if you actually take the time to look at the views on our channels compared to the amount of views their tweets announcing them get, it's astronomical. False and I may play a part in informing people, but in no way are we damaging the brand by simply covering mishaps that millions of people already know about. And in their attempt to protect their company's brand image, they made themselves look absolutely worse.
Also, you have no idea how many times Kyo and I actually had to remake this part, because there was literally new NijiSanji drama every week, it seemed like. More recently, the whole thing where NijiSanji members aren't even allowed to receive their golden play and silver button, literally the physical manifestation of their hard work, and they're not even allowed to hold it physically. It would just be tucked and locked in some case somewhere, only to collect dust and to celebrate NijiSanji the company's achievements, but not NijiSanji livers themselves. At this point, all of the drama so far wasn't really even surprising to a lot of people that paid attention. A lot of people actually had some idea that some of these terrible conditions in EN was true. Hints were being given out by the talents. Some of them would even accidentally or even intentionally voice their grievances to the public and confirm some information. So as was mentioned earlier, the dream of being in NijiSanji isn't as grandiose as they made it seem. And while the public doesn't know exactly how many people are being burnt out or feel exploited by the company, we can damn well be sure that quite a significant number of them are. Especially since it seems like quite a few talents aren't having fun in the company as much as they used to. One has to ask, what does NijiSanji stand for? Is it for the freedom of the VTubers? Because we've had quite some issues with that one, don't we? Is it to provide an entertainment space for fans just to enjoy their oshis? Because that space is getting disrupted seemingly every 2 weeks. Or is NijiSanji solely and primarily just a means to make money? A capitalistic venture whose prestige is a mere mirage to take advantage of the starry-eyed, the passionate, and the desperate. A company that would rather silence its own talents and community members just to maintain their already cracking public image. A means to platform profitable and vulnerable VTubers, but discard those that aren't. At this point, one has to ask the question, what does the name NijiSanji mean to us? I'd like to end this video with critiques that aren't founded on the community. Just personal ones that a lot of people may disagree with, and you're all free to do so. A lot of the NijiSanji VTubers, they don't feel like VTubers anymore. There's little of that magic of VTubing that I used to sense in them. And in terms of criticism, why silence it? There are people looking out for the livers in NijiSanji. People that recognize the problems and want to voice their opinions in hopes of it being addressed. You can't just ignore them, especially if they're being harsh. 4chan offers very little constructive criticism, so don't look at 4chan. Why are they living rent-free in your heads? Look at the comments, look at the community. It's hard to parse through what is considered genuine criticism and just a troll anti. Distinguishing what is considered inflammatory and harsh but fair will be difficult, but I think it's worth sifting through. One doesn't have to agree with everything I said in this video. Some of what I said in this video you'll probably feel isn't valid, and that I just don't have enough context or know the exact happenings inside the company to make such criticism. After all, I'm just one guy that talks about random shit about VTubers. But I am also a NijiSanji fan. I am aware that a lot of my points might not be that strong or is too subjective, but I imagine a lot of the points and observations I made also hold water and make sense. And that to me is what matters. Hell, there might be good points and criticism that I failed to mention. This isn't to spark new controversy by bringing up old ones. This is me wanting to talk about this little systematic problem that they have, even if I'm not the one qualified to do it. There are issues here. Lots of them, even, and everyone, including the fans, know it. And while I recognize that there are just some issues that cannot be fixed or is too complicated to untangle, I just hope that the agency and the branch can do what it can. They don't have to change their business model or do a complete overhaul of their goals, but they do have to make the environment better around their talents and address issues like the lack of coordination, the selective enforcement of rules and favoritism, the disagreements between other members that leak out into the public because someone was too impulsive and couldn't stay in their lane, the control of information to make sure no more leaks happen, the lack of transparency, the sheer neglect, the lack of respect for the audience's money, time, and intelligence, and many more. Again, I hope NijiSanji as a company, EN as a branch, and as a key force in the industry are going to improve. Perhaps NijiEN resistance might even be in order too. Because as of right now, even before the Zion dossier, the branch looks like a mess. I'm still going to support my favorite NijiEN and NijiSanji livers, and I will for the foreseeable future. But I don't think I can support the company or the branch as it is, and believe me, I would have the same attitude towards even Hololive under similar circumstances. Right now, this is the absolute state of NijiSanji, and whether it stays this way will be up to them. Hello, thank you for watching this video. I truly appreciate it, so feel free to comment and discuss about the video whether you agree or disagree with specific takes, or if you even agree at all. A few days after this video releases, I'm going to hold a stream about it so we can have a little discussion. So if you want to join, feel free to drop in, even if you're a NijiSanji fan that wants to defend them or want to support them, because we don't want that stream to be overwhelmingly negative, actually. So yeah, feel free to drop in, and again, thank you for watching this video. That's about it. See ya.